Welcome, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving week. My name is Karl Vilacoba. I am the Communications Director for Monmouth University's Urban Coast Institute, or the UCI, which is located about a mile from the beach in West Long Branch, New Jersey. And I also work as project manager on the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. We recently completed a long in the making reorganization of the portal's collection of well over a thousand different maps showing commercial fishing activities and management areas, based in large part on input from our users, including members of the region's fishing industry. The aim of the reorg was to make finding the maps you're looking for much easier, and we do hope that you'll find that we've succeeded in that. In this morning's edition of our How Tuesday webinar series, we'll walk you through everything that's changed, but we also wanted to take this as an opportunity to give those of you who may not have been tracking our progress on fishing data through the years, a kind of a good primer on all of the types of fishing data that we do have available to you on the portal. We designed this new data organization in collaboration with the Northeast Ocean Data Portal. So you may be seeing some similar changes on that site in the near or semi-near future soon too. And on that note, I'd like to acknowledge Nick Napoli is on the line here, and Nick is the executive director of NROC, Marco's counterpart to the north in New England, and he helps lead both the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic Ocean data portals. Our presentation shouldn't be too long. I think probably in the 20-25 minutes range, and then we'll open it up to questions or comments, anything that you might have. We welcome any questions on, anything about the portal as well, not just limited to the fishing data and what you'll be seeing us talk about here. Our first presenter this morning is Jay Odell. He is a member of the portal technical team and the Urban Coast Institute's Fisheries and Ocean Conservation Fellow. Jay is going to kick things off with some background on our data before I do a demo of the maps on the portal. Jay actually co-led the team that created the portal back 15 years ago while he was on staff with the Nature Conservancy. He stepped away from the portal project for a while when his duties at TNC changed, but we were lucky enough to get him back about 2 years ago. And now he's doing a lot of great work to make sure that our fishing data is current, relevant, and finding its way into all of the right hands, including yours. So Jay, the floor is yours, and I'll turn off my camera and mute.
All right. Thanks for the nice introduction, Karl. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Thanksgiving week. And let's go ahead and move to the first slide, please. So maybe before we get started, kind of cover a few definitions in case some of you folks might not be familiar with them. We often talk about vessel trip reports, VTR. These are fishermen supplied harvest records that are required to be filled out for all fisheries that require a federal permit. A subset of those fisheries are also of federally permitted fisheries use VMS, or Vessel Management Vessel Monitoring System data. This is a gadget on boats that receives and sends information to satellites and provides very precise information on location continuously, and it can be set to send position information at specific intervals depending on the fishery rules for that particular species. The and then we have management areas, which are specific to fisheries. Some are specific, very specific to fisheries, like a scallop rotational area, and some are more general. So from the VTR data, we have a major data product which we'll be showing you, which are called fishing footprints. And we have another one that is now being archived, no longer being updated, called Communities at Sea. And we'll get into more about these, the nuances of these data products, useful for different purposes, different pros and cons with them. But we'll just say the dependent variable, or the thing that is being mapped, in the case of the fishing footprints, can be either pounds or the number of seafood, number of pounds of product landed, or it can be revenue. Whereas communities at sea maps days at sea labor, including crew time, and explicitly connects records to fishing ports. We are deciding to add the AIS data in. Many of you may be familiar with AIS. This is a gadget essentially and a system that's required to be on boats that are greater than 65 feet. And it also, like VMS data, sends position information, although by radio, not through satellites. And while we don't consider the AIS to be a super exacting, necessarily reliable and dependable way to understand fishing effort, it definitely adds a lot of explanatory power in some situations, and that can be explored now. Next slide, please. So, as Karl alluded to a little bit, a few years back, working with our colleagues with NROC in the Northeast and RODA, the Responsible Offshore Development Alliance. RODA did a project for us with support from NOAA that really went out and talked to fishermen and got advice on how to make the portal easier to use. And one of the major, findings of that work were basically please organize the data by fishery management plan or by specific fishery as opposed to big long lists organized by data type. And so we embarked on that. It turned out to be a little bit more complicated than we thought originally, but we got it settled and sorted. And there were other requests that came in at that time, increasing the offerings for for VMS maps and bringing in more of the footprints data. And there was also a number of instances where we had data management layers that were out of date that need to be retired. So that's a summary of a lot of different changes that we went through. Go ahead and hit the next slide, please, Karl. So we sort of a two-phase approach. We ended up adding a lot of new fishery management area maps and getting into some interesting details with the VMS data, for example, because it gives a continuous report of position information. It doesn't necessarily zero in on fishing locations. However, some of the industry advisors and folks familiar with the fishery chatted about essentially filtering the data by speed. So by filtering out the fastest moving records, we could zero in on just areas where fishing was occurring. And then as it turned out, people are becoming interested in transit areas, particularly with respect to potential impacts with offshore wind development being between where you are and where you want to go. And so that same speed filtering approach can be used in reverse, just looking at the fastest moving records to define transit lanes. And some of that data is on the portal now too. I won't read through all of this, but we went through a lot of a lot of fussy changes to get things a little bit quite a bit more accurate and up to date. And along the way, Karl may want to drop in the chat at some point. There's some really nice ocean stories, which are the the uh, the reports, the web entries that Karl always does for new data types that we add to the portal. Pretty cool stuff. I think we can go ahead, Karl, to the next slide. Um, but Yeah, I'll go through this slide and then maybe pause and see if folks have clarifying questions before we keep going. So again, to summarize, we summarized by fishery, and we'll show you. We'll take you on a tour through that in a moment. The management areas better aligned with their fisheries. We had a rather confusing user interface for accessing the communities at sea data, which has now been resolved through some technical improvements on the back end. Our great team, which is a nonprofit called which is led by a nonprofit called EcoTrust with a lot of great help from Rutgers and others, made some changes to the back end, which allow us to have these hierarchical nested menus in a way that we weren't able to do before. And that has um, made the whole organization a lot more compact. Um, so I'll pause here and invite either Karl to or Nick to add things that I may have overlooked or questions that may come up so far.
None on my end.
All right, let's keep rolling then. Uh, so the the legacy organization is still exists on the portal. So the way that people may be familiar, the way of accessing the fisheries data people are familiar with is still there until the end of January. Um, One of the nice things is the process of sort of error checking and peer reviewing these data, which we have done, including 2 sessions with state agency folks and another session with council and commission staff. We we it, it, you're never done with a project like this, so we're right now looking in much greater detail at historical management areas. We have a clear advice from folks that they would like to see historical rotations, the rotational area schemes for scallop fishing in past years. So we're going to put that up probably on sliders. Um, and I see a question in the chat which is a great question because it was one that I was worried about. Question is, if you made bookmarks using the old organization scheme, will they still work? The answer is yes, they will. Um, so I don't know. We're pretty excited about that. All these changes, and I don't know. Just kind of leave it up for questions, and we could do a screen share and look at some of the new organization. I see Ryan has his hand up. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, Jay, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about kind of how the rule of three applies in these data sets and where they might be impacted, if they might be impacted by that kind of need for the confidentiality in the data that you're using. So
Yeah.
just generally, I think it might be helpful context.
Yeah. And we always say great question, but that really is because I meant to mention that to make a real clear point, actually, that the Ocean Data Portal team, Monmouth, we never get anywhere. We never see the raw data. The data are scrubbed or cleaned and prepared, um, including the application of what's called the rule of three. Um, the rule of three basically is designed to keep data products from revealing personal information that's too personal. And so basically, there needs to be at least 3 different individual vessels working in a particular time and area and gear type before that. And if there aren't, then those data are removed. You will see, for example, when you look at the fishing footprints data for some of the smaller fisheries, um, smaller in terms of number of participants, say for tilefish, you won't see data products at all, like say for fishing footprints for tilefish. Because I may need to double check that, but I'm pretty confident that's because of the rule of three in that particular case.
And Jay, following up on that, I wonder how best can we communicate that to people that are using the portal on a specific layer scale? Because like if I wanted to know that the reason why there wasn't anything there was the rule of three, how would I find that out?
You can say with the communities at sea data, especially that there, it does get into that quite a bit in the data catalog entries and the metadata. And I think the metadata has a full explanation of what that means. I've not looked on the footprints data catalog entries to see that as well, but I can look into that and get back to you on it.
Yeah. I think that there's higher level language that refers to that attention to not disclosing anybody's private business information, but I don't believe that NOAA has as part of their sort of production of the records. I don't believe that they create a list saying specifically, sort of what was deprecated, which fisheries were not fully shown because of that. Nick may know more about that, something that we can look into. Um,
The reason why I bring it up is you can run into these situations where like CVAL offshore wind farm, you know, we may very well know that there's fishing happening there. It doesn't show up in the Marco data portal. So if you're trying to explain or use maps from the Marco data portal, and there's no way for people to kind of, and I'm not saying this is something you guys can fix. Obviously, we'd need NOAA to provide that information. They probably wouldn't, but there's no way to really demonstrate beyond, anecdotally drawing on maps, which doesn't carry the same weight as being able to say, hey, here it is in the portal. Take a look at the conflict, the overlap.
right, right. Something for us to definitely take back and think about a bit in terms of what we could do in the future to sort of alert users to the possibility or the the possibility or the existence of, there's something here, there's fishing here, there's fishing effort here that we can't show you. So that there's it's a it's not a false negative. Although I think, generally, the for any evaluation of ocean planning, permitting, and management, you want to understand what the fishing activity is in an area. These data give you a much better sense of what's going on, and part of what they will give you, I think, is an indication of the kind of who specifically or which gear groups and which folks from which ports you might want to be talking to understand what the full picture is, because the map products can only get you part way there.
All right, shall we move into the map itself?
Yes.
Let's do it. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right. So, as portal users know, this is our homepage, portal.midatlanticocean.org. And you can always get to our web app, our mapping application, which we call Marine Planner, either by just clicking on map up here or view maps. But before I do that, just a quick point out that a summary of all of the changes that Jay touched on and which I'll now show can be found on our blog right here. And it walks through how we organize things. So if you need to refer to this later, you can. And I will be posting a recording of this webinar down at the bottom. I'll revise this. And we have a webinars page up there under our help tab as well. And also, as Jay mentioned, we have in our ocean stories section a few different stories that have to do with fishing, like this one where I did a kind of a trip diary, a ride along with a scallop fishing vessel out of Point Pleasant. There's one that Jay was involved in years ago here with Monty Hawkins out of Maryland. But there was a specific mention of this one here, number 4, right now, in the slides, which gives a further kind of definitional walkthrough of what Jay touched on with what the meaning of VMS is, what the meaning of VTR is, and walks through the different stuff that we have on the portal and some different external sources that might be of use in future priorities. I will caveat that we did this one a couple of years ago, so it doesn't have any information about the recent reorganization being done, and we'll probably need a refresh soon, but it could still have some value to you just for informational purposes. So now on to the map. You'll now see that for the moment we have 3 fishing themes here. That won't be for long. As Jay mentioned, we will be retiring the old one here on January 31st. And let's look at that. So here is what everybody has been using now for a lot of years. And as you scroll down, the first thing you notice is that it's really quite deep. You've got up here VMS, VTR, management areas of many different kinds. At the very bottom, we have the fishing footprints layers, which is probably not optimal. You'd want to have them higher up. Now you look at, in comparison, the new fishing theme here. And that's it. Just this couple of simplified bins, which I hope will make this much easier for people. The 2 main ones, fishery specific and multi-fishery. So we'll start with the first, specific. And you see here bluefish, lobster, scallops, spiny dogfish, some major fisheries throughout the region. They're not all equal. You click on something like bluefish, you only have a few fishing footprints maps to at your disposal. Something like herring, you have some more, or lobster, you've got, some management areas, layers here that apply to it. And in fishing footprints, you can see you've got, as Jay mentioned, both landings and revenue in a couple of different year ranges. So here's what it looks like, for example, for 2011 through 15. And then scrolling down, you have something like scallop, which has quite a bit more data. Clicking down, you're going to have a pretty lengthy list of fishing footprints layers that apply, and management areas, and the VMS. So for this one, you can look at it for something like 2015 through 19, which is all vessel activity there. And you can see in some cases we have a couple of alternatives here, like 15 through 16, and then this version of 15 through 16, which is 5 knots or slower, which is meant to give a better simulation of where actual fishing activity was taking place. You can see that difference. Scrolling down here, multi-fishery. I'll close this for simplicity. As Jay mentioned, we have a lot of data that captures multiple fisheries. So for example, if you're going by gear type, if you're going to do, for example, trawl for 2011 through 15, you can take that view. There's also maps in here that show specific designations by the councils, or groupings like highly migratory species. Under that, we have fishing vessel activity. So here's where we have the few VMS layers that are not specific to a fishery. So all VMS vessel activity for 15 through 19. And then we have some here that show transit. So greater than 5 knots, greater than 6 knots, declared out of fishery. We have never before had AIS data in the fishing theme, but this was something that came up as a request as we started doing demos of this to users on our staging site. And so for now, we have these that show fishing vessel transit counts, in this case for 2024, and we have them back through 2020. We are going to be adding, as it was said on that slide, our monthly sliders, but just for fishing. If you look right now in our maritime theme, the first thing that you'll see is this list of every year we have the sort of annual summaries of different vessel types, but then we have the sliders where you can actually look at um, fishing only and toggle through and select cargo or tug and tow, etc. And we will be setting those up so you will have access to the fishing only. And then finally, there's a few different categories of management areas which are not specific to a fishery. So there's some habitat ones like the Frank Lautenberg Deep Sea Coral Protection Area. And you can click on that for a pop-up that tells you about some of these discrete zones and what you're seeing there. Other, so things like the Karl Schuster Horseshoe Crab Reserve or the Greater Atlantic Region Statistical Areas. And finally, areas that we have proposals that are being considered and out for public comment. And as they get adopted, we would basically wind up moving them into their specific fisheries for permanent holding. The communities at sea, as Jay mentioned, a change here we made is to put an archive label on it because the last versions that we have of these are 2011 through 15. We do hope and keep the line open, so to speak, and have been talking with the Rutgers researchers who created these, and it's their methodology about trying to revive these, but there's nothing imminent happening. So for now, we are just putting that archive label on it to let people know that they are on the older side. So a change, if you've been a long-time user, is that these were always in the vessel, the commercial fishing VTR, that's what they were called. They are now lumped together where these individual by port layers are now matched with their kind of total regional summaries. And the cool thing about these communities at sea, which are so called because you can click here for a pop-up to see for any area which communities actually relied on that area at sea. And in this particular case, you can see Barnegat, Massachusetts, Virginia, Connecticut, a real nice illustration of the regional and kind of cross-state nature of fishing. We have here also these total ports. So for 2011 through 15 for dredge, these are all the participating ports up and down the coast. And you can click on any of them for a pop-up that tells you some economic activity about it. So in this case, which is Point Pleasant, you can see accounted for about 10% of the regional total of trips, which were 4,709, 27,000 total fisher days. So how many people were on the boats in all those days and the regional total of that. And I think this makes it easier before you kind of had to guess or just search around to see the individual ports. But now you know Point Pleasant is one that counts here, so you can type that in and click there. And this map will show you where 90% of the effort for that port was spent at sea. And hopefully that just makes it simpler to know what's available to you. I skipped one group right here, deliberately, recreational. So this is our party and charter boat data. When you click on that, it may look familiar to you, and that is because it was created drawing on the same data and the same cartography as the communities at sea. One interesting difference here, you can click on these ports to get some of that economic activity, but in this case, it will show for the total fisher days. This is counting people who are on the boats who are, customers. So for something like Brielle here, or that's Point Pleasant, in that range, about 144,000 people in that period, giving a good snapshot of the economic importance of fishing. Um, and you know, the party and charter boat business. And then last, we do have a couple of kind of loose layers that didn't fit into any of these categories. Artificial reefs being one. The reefs are actually the most, or one of the most actively hit layers activated on the portal. And so you can click any of them for a pop-up that tells you what the name of that reef was. And it's interesting when you do have these on in combination with the party and charter boats, because you can see a very clear relationship between some of the hot spots for fishing and where the reefs are. Um, so with that, I think I will pause and open this up for any questions about anything that I've demonstrated or said. Thanks, Colleen. Jay, Nick, anything you would want to clean up on my part? Anything I've said or have not said that you think should be mentioned?
The only thing I have to add, Karl, it goes back to a question earlier. On the VMS data, if you hit the I button, it shows exactly what's been removed from um, the percentage of activity that's been removed from the layer as a result of confidentiality.
That is right. Thank you. And let me show that. That is a great point. So
It'll be in the most recent product, the 2015 and 2019. Yeah, there you go.
So if you look on the legend here, Ryan, filtered for confidentiality, in this case, 1.38%. And as Nick said, in the older layers, I don't believe that was the case. Nope. And that was kind of one of the outcomes of the outreach that was done a couple of years ago, that was a priority.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, Carl. I will say that it's interesting that although our recreational party charter data goes, I think, is fairly old, going back to 2015, when I've chatted with captains about the data and looked at the maps, they're pretty much like, that looks about right because the artificial reefs aren't picking up and moving around. So to the extent that the fishery is focused on to the for the subset of the fishery that's focused on structure, it's probably a pretty accurate representation of what's happening today. Not that it doesn't need to be updated.
And since we had a minute here, I was too fearful to turn this on before because I have a really old computer that sometimes struggles to load the more data intensive sliders. But here is one example, 2024 AIS, where I have the fishing selected. And for that, you can toggle through manually from one month to another to look at the data, or you can just press this play button to automatically animate them. And, these take sometimes a little bit of a load. My computer takes more time than probably yours does, but there it goes.
So it's sort of an interesting if you find yourself just wanting to explore maps, one can lose oneself for a while in these, trying just to understand what's going on behind some of the patterns. And it's pretty interesting, the forensics, if you will, of trying to sort out, looking at specific fishery openings and different data types to kind of using different data types, the VMS, the VTR, the AIS, to kind of construct a better picture, a better understanding of what's happening in a place. Ryan.
Yeah, Jay, on that point, I wonder, has there have been not necessarily here at Marco or Monmouth, but generally, are people using these data and doing change detection to see if the fisheries are shifting through the I guess the effort of the fishermen?
That's a good question. We're not setting out to create specific products that show that change. However, there are interesting things that can be done. We have done similar types of products showing the movement of species, and then kind of doing you could make a map that shows, I don't know, areas that had been left in red and areas that had been colonized in green. You could do the same thing, maybe with some of the fisheries data. Be interesting. Um, and I think that idea is sort of behind the request to show the rotational scallop fishing areas. Um, People are interested in what's been happening over time and where fishermen go. There's a lot that goes into that decision, including what the weather is, which areas are open, markets and a lot of things. Ryan's, your hand is still up, but I'm not sure if you have. Yep. I guess I am curious if any folks on the line. I mean, there's no bad questions here. If this is confusing, as if folks have questions, or if there's frustrations, you've used this and there's things that you wish it would do, or you wish that you could see that you can't. We always, either now or anytime, love to hear about that. One thing that's been on the portal since the very beginning is that little orangish colored thing that says provide feedback there in the bottom right of the screen. We used to kind of have a contest to see who could get, because multiple people get the email from that, So we used to sort of have a contest on our team to see who could respond the fastest. So
The answer is
keep us
me.
busy.
And I'll say again, if you have any questions about the portal that are not even related to fishing, we're here. We welcome it. Go ahead,
Right.
Will.
Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, since you opened the floor with any things that might have frustrated you in the past, and it's not a big frustration, but I think it was the VTF layers or VTR, sorry. Looking at different periods of time, there wasn't really the ability to lay them all on top of each other at the same time. Is that still kind of going to be the way the data works moving forward?
For the old communities at sea, you mean?
Yeah.
So, for example, actually, that changed. So now here's dredge activity 96 through 2000, and then we'll put on. We did actually change that as part of this. They used to be uh, in radio format, which meant that you can only check one at a time, but you can now.
That's
We
what.
have regular vicious fights about whether or not to allow people to turn on layers of the same type or not, with good arguments on both sides of that.
Well, I appreciate whoever won that one. Thank you.
The other thing, just as a preview of coming attractions, we have a slightly similar situation right now with marine life data as we had with the fisheries data starting out, which is essentially not yet taking advantage of the ability to do menus within menus and these drop downs. So we're going to be in 26 doing a similar reorg of the marine life data that we think will make it much easier to find what you're looking for.
That's right, and that will result in all likelihood with the marine life library just being rolled into one theme as the fishing will. So again, on January 31st, this old one will disappear, and the communities at sea being a separate thing will also disappear. They'll all just be under this one combined fishing theme. Hello, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Laura and Colleen.
Guys,
Well,
good to hear and see you all.
thank you, Laura. Laura was one of the original launchers of the very first portal too. So acknowledge that. Well, since she's on the line.
Longtime leader of our ocean mapping and data team, which is kind of the Marco work group that advises and instructs what we do.
Well, I don't know if there's no need to sort of spend the next 15 minutes begging for questions. Some things don't take an hour. I think maybe, Karl, we could probably give people time to go shopping for celery and cinnamon.
Yeah, everyone needs it. And I'll just leave our email up here on screen, which is the main portal email, and send to that and we'll get it. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us on this holiday week. Before we do drop, I do want to just give a quick promo that we will have a couple of other How Tuesdays coming up in early 2026. The first will be covering some new maps showing ocean acidification measures throughout the region, which we worked on in collaboration with MACAN. And then we also will be doing another one on Northeast Regional Habitat Assessment fish species maps, which will help fill some really important gaps, especially for nearshore waters and bays. So just keep an eye on our blog and our calendar pages for announcements on that. And for those who couldn't make it, we will have a recording of this posted today. And with that, thank you, everybody, and have a great, great Thanksgiving.
Thank you all. Thanks, Karl. Thanks, Jay.